Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the EdTech Disruptor series. My name is Leena Marie Saleh, the EdTech Guru, and today we're diving into an episode that honestly blew me away. I sat down with the team from BrightMinds AI, and this conversation is so much more than just talking about artificial intelligence. We get into what really matters in education right now, community, how we build it, how we protect it, and how we make sure technology actually supports human connection instead of replacing it. Bright Minds share the story behind their platform, their passion for making learning more collaborative and accessible, and why they believe the future of education has to feel like a community and less like an isolated experience. We talk about student engagement, teacher support, AI as a co pilot instead of a threat, and how we can empower learners to feel confident, creative, and connected. This is one of those conversations that leaves you inspired and hopeful about where education is heading. So if you're an educator, parent, an edtech lover, an edtech founder, or just curious about what AI can look like when humans stay at the center, you're going to want to watch this one through the end. Now, let's jump into my interview with BrightMinds AI. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Leena Marie Saleh, the EdTech Guru. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me on this journey, for all the support that you give me, and for following along. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and let's get ready to do this. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of the EdTech Disruptor series. Today, we are joined by two very special guests from BrightMinds AI. We are joined by Jessica Maddry, who is the CEO and co-founder, and her other co-founder, Claire Smizer. Muldoon. If you don't remember Claire, she's also been on another episode of the Teacher Transition Experts. So we're excited to have her back on and share all about everything about their business. So Jessica and Claire, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, good. Thank you for asking.
Amazing. It's great to have you on and to share about your new startup and your journey and the things that you guys are doing right now. To kick everything off, I'd love to start with you, Jessica, just a little bit about your background and who you are, and then we'll kick it to Claire to share a little bit about herself as well.
I am about 20 years into education career. I originally started with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, where I worked in juvenile drug courts, and then made a transition into teaching and have spent 14 years in classrooms. The last 7 I spent in international teaching.
Great. And Claire, over to you.
Yep. So 6 years in California education, teaching and everything from 4th to 7th grade over there. And then I hopped into EdTech in 2020 and have been in EdTech and particularly EdTech startups since. So that's kind of my background. Wearing a ton of different hats in a bunch of different little companies.
Yeah. So I love hearing about both of your backgrounds and the variance, which I'm sure plays into the company that you've started today. So tell us a little bit about your journey to founding BrightMinds AI and a little bit about just the company itself.
I feel like it's very hard to summarize actually how it ended up founding an entire company over some of the concepts that were there. It began with working towards some educational content development right at the onset of AI. That led to a few adventures, and it led to me also grabbing my Ethically Emerging Technologist certifications. 3 words I did not know went together until I actually gained that certification. Like I said before, I had spent 7 years in international teaching. The last school I was with went through kind of an overhaul on our curriculum. I learned a lot there. And then when we returned to the United States, I saw that there was a lot of space for improvement in the education system here. So as I began to work, then I fortunately bumped into my now co-founder, Claire Smizer Muldoon.
Yeah, the kind of kickoff moment for us, or at least in my mind, where BrightMinds really started was there was a post that Jessica had made about a data breach in Louisiana several years ago. And the post was about, just having found out a year later what information of her children's was leaked during this data breach. And again, finding out a year after the fact. And so I reached out to her and we just started talking about like, how can that be? And what all was leaked and what does that mean? And where's the accountability? And what we found was very complementary lenses of the same problem. So where Jessica came at it from her daughter only uses 3 platforms regularly at school and yet is enrolled in 34. How is that safe? Because you've got that many different exposures. Where on the other side, I'm sitting there thinking, how in the world can you pay for 31 extra platforms, even if it was just that grade level, which we know it's not? So as we were talking about it, it became very clear that, again, those 2 complementary lenses lended themselves to having very rich discussions about these companies that are in the market now, things that districts are doing to better protect their students or areas where they're not protecting their students very well. And then obviously both of us are parents. And so it also overlapped a little bit into the, how can you be a cognizant and aware parent today when schools have all these tools you may not even know exist. So that was kind of the kickoff point where we started thinking about what could the 2 of us do to get in and really do some good in the space outside of the traditional structure of EdTech, which can be fairly limiting.
Yeah, it can be. Knowing all that and kind of building on, what can you do where, and we know that there's always lots of gaps in everything. And their data is really exposed at a level that I think parents are actually not aware of, because there are so many programs and interacting, and we just as teachers are guilty of this, being like, oh, just sign up for that, or oh, just sign up for that, or oh, just sign up for that. And those are just the 34 are just the ones that the districts know about, but that's not the other ones that might be happening in the classroom. So it's an interesting space to kind of look at. So then, knowing all that and all of your background and all the things that kind of led you there, then tell us a little bit about BrightMinds and what you guys are choosing to.
Sure. So we basically have the Big 5 is kind of our Big 5 service offering. And I'll also caveat by saying we are a service first company. We deeply believe there's a balance, right? You need product, you need ed tech in your classroom. But we, in my opinion, and I will look at Jessica as I say this for a nod, in our opinion, that balance, we've fallen way out of whack on that balance. And that new products, new tools are not always, or sometimes ever, the answer to a problem a district has. If you don't have the expertise in-house or don't get the support that you need from the platform, that really bespoke support that you need for your district, you risk bringing in a product that you don't know how to use, doesn't work for you the way you thought it was, any number of other things. We feel very strongly that the service aspect of the ed tech sector is just it's not there. There's not enough people coming in and doing the let's get our hands dirty, how do these systems all work together, that kind of stuff. So again, we moved away from working in the product space and move toward we're a service first. So we even refer to ourselves as an ed service company just to make sure that we catch people's ear with wait a minute, what is ed services? So Big 5. The Big 5 offerings, first one is our EdTech audit, where we will come in and look at anything from duplicates, orphaned accounts, all the way to efficiency mapping across all of your platforms, across your grades, to figure out what platforms are being best utilized, which are being least utilized. How can you maximize the platforms that you're using as it is to create the outcomes you want while minimizing your district spend? Because, there's never enough money to go around, but certainly now with federal cuts, other concerns at state levels, now there's really not enough money to make sure that you can have everything. And I think the COVID era spending, I think people thought that was going to be a new norm and became very comfortable, as you would with 3 years or 4 years of significant extra money, to then come out of it and not just come out of it at pre-COVID levels, but to come out of it at pre-COVID levels minus a bunch of federal monies. It's a shock. And this is the first time in American history where we have schools that are on the verge of bankruptcy. Districts that may have to close as a result of not having students, but as a result of not having enough money to keep their doors open. And for a public institution, that's terrifying. EdTech audit, big one. We know that on average, about 64% of licenses are unused, underused, or duplicates. So there's a huge amount of savings that can be potentially can be there for districts. Next 2 services that go together would be our AI policy development. We've even had districts ask us if we'll do tech handbook reviews. So we basically will go back through and look and make sure that your district's risk tolerance, which of course has to be in compliance with federal and state law, is met by all of your vendors. And then we'll highlight hey, here are a couple of vendors, or here are your vendors that don't meet those. Here are some vendors that you might want to look at. And then we develop that policy in the form of a living document so that as districts continue to develop their use of AI and their adoption of tools, that document can grow to reflect that. The complementary service to that is the only service that we don't offer long term. That is our fractional AI support or our fractional support. So essentially, we'll come in for stints of 3 to 12 months and help put that process in place for vetting tools, build up your internal knowledge base, internal capacity, with the aim of always offloading that work either onto someone or a group of someone's in the district that have the capacity, or all the way on the other end where you're ready to hire somebody. We'll put the job description together, go find the person, interview people, recommend hiring, and then we'll onboard that new person. And again, the only reason we don't offer it long term is because we deeply believe that should not be done by a third party. That should always be an internal person who's managing your adoption, your privacy policies, all that kind of stuff. So we offer that as a limited time service just to get people up and off the ground and headed in the right direction. And then the last two, professional development and community engagement nights. Our professional development, we run a bit differently than most. Instead of having a one-size-fits-all PD, we quadrant our participants into 4 different groups based on a proprietary survey that we use to sort them. They get an opportunity to be very authentic in this, and then we build learning pathways specifically for those people in those cohorts, making sure that we're giving them opportunities to explore what AI can do in a classroom, but not pressuring them to feel that they must use it. So it's exploratory. We're giving people the option to come out and get a little bit of get their hands dirty in it, to see what it's like in low risk or no risk ways. And then we also focus on the idea that a lot of the barriers to success that underserved students see can be offloaded to AI. So I won't go too much into that, but look for a white paper from us here soon about that. That's probably one of our most interesting conversations that we have with people stems around that offloading some of that basic stuff to students. And then the other one, the last service, is community engagement, where instead of just handing you a packet of activities to do with your community, we actually do a holistic survey of community members, parents, teachers, admin, everybody. And then we put together either a couple of activities and then come and facilitate them, or we'll even build you out a roadmap and come facilitate the first couple. The idea being we want administration, teachers, parents, students, everybody sitting together in a space, working through some misconception or working through some pillar the district has positioned as a guideline, and working through that together. So we're all equal. There's nobody sage on the stage, that kind of stuff. As far as I'm aware, we don't have a ton of people in the space actually providing the actual facilitation for the community nights, let alone them being tailored to the district and the school. And we've gotten some really good feedback from people who are really excited to be able to do something like that that's very bespoke for their community. So we've gotten some really nice feedback on that. That was as about nutshell-y as I can possibly get with those, but those are our 5. Jessica, what would you add that I missed?
I mean, obviously, that is, in fact, our big 5, and well done on the explanation. I think, when we began with BrightMinds, it has grown even more important that we feel like the entire community is represented in every move that we make. That's where we lean entirely into services first so that we could adjust our offers and the activities and the things that schools need to actually just meet their communities where they are right now and service that whole entire school community versus just here is a simple product or a service, take it, run. Now it's still here. We wanted to just revisit and give everybody a voice back for themselves inside of that whole community.
And really hopefully repair what we see across the nation as being a very fractured relationship between districts and communities, parents of students or not. Just very, very animosity-driven relationships. And so we want to help districts reposition themselves as community hubs and places of learning and respect versus community versus district on decisions. That's a huge, in that I will say, in my opinion, is a massive reason that we're in the position we are in education now in this country.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think overall, COVID did a for the first time in a long time, a good job on opening the window for parents to be able to see what's going on inside the school districts. And then as soon as we went back, those doors closed again. And I don't think it's like some schools I've worked in, they don't let parents volunteer at all or come into the classrooms. And then some others that I have worked in, it's a mandatory requirement that parents come in and volunteer. So it's very interesting between that. And then I worked in title schools where you're required to do community events because that's part of the funding and part of the processes. So I think that's an interesting component of it all. So you guys have the big five, and we'll dive into, a little bit more of that process. But how do you find, so I speak to a lot of founders, and usually they are very much driven in one pathway, not necessarily branched out into five pathways. And everybody has their own ideas of how they pursue their startups, and there's no wrong way to do anything, and there's no maybe even correct way to do anything. But how are you finding that as yourself, as founders of the company, managing those five different pathways, really bootstrapping between the two of you?
Jessica, you go first.
Can we just say roller coaster ride? Actually, to be honest, the big five grew out of looking at schools holistically. As a big picture, what is it that we can offer solutions to that works across not just the school, but when kids leave the school and they go home, how does this impact families? So it only really just felt natural to build something out that answered kind of the five big things that we were seeing on repeat. So navigating the five, it's all, to me, I guess it feels pretty connected. I think Claire might agree with that, but she might.
Yeah. I think the through line on all five, despite them being relatively disparate services, the through line is transparency, which we both and many other people out there feel that is both what's missing in a lot of areas, not just education. But when you look at transparency as the guiding light, or as the thing that we feel is the piece that's missing from education that keeps it being stuck in the rut that it is now, all five of those things funnel in. So your EdTech audit, where you're reviewing with your vendors and making sure your licenses are accurate, you're using transparency to be the best financial steward you can be, which translates into community good. If it means that parents don't have to raise as much money for their kids' band instruments or uniforms, that's great. More money in the pocket of the people that help keep the school afloat, all the way over to the, community engagement. It's pretty obvious, but like all the way over even to the AI policy development. Part of our service on the AI policy development is that we create a multi-stakeholder group, which includes parents, students, admin, support staff, so that every person in a district or every group in a district feels represented, even if those things don't make it into the final draft. Even if not everybody's ideas make it into the final draft, you had a seat at the table, you had a voice at the table, and you can see the process through which the idea that you suggested, or if I was sitting on the committee, the idea I suggested, it was heard. And if it didn't make the final cut, I at least understand why that decision was made, as opposed to it going into isolation, being written, and then coming back. And then I have no idea why my idea didn't make it in. One of the things that, again, we feel strongly about and that data supports, when people feel heard, it's less about the outcome and more about the feeling. Not that we don't think that ideas should be included in final things. We obviously do. But the idea, again, being just the transparency of seeing how these decisions are made can oftentimes mean much less distress in a community when a board or a superintendent, whatever, rolls out a new decision. And if they don't have, if anybody, teachers included, and in fact, teachers even more so now than before, if they don't feel included, students also, everybody, if you don't feel included, then it feels a lot more like authoritarian dictatorship. Here are the rules versus, hey, these are the rules that we've all agreed on. And we all know why they came to be the way they are, even if we don't agree with them. Yeah, it's what's interesting is it's good communication. And for a variety of reasons, fear, being bitten, those kind of things like that, those doors have shut. And unfortunately, because they're shut, they're very hard to reopen. And it really puts up guards between people in a district that should naturally be working together very closely. These are your kids, these are your community members, this is your district. So we just feel really strongly about that being a collaborative, transparent, community-based environment. So yeah, transparency is my through line for all of these services, and they all feed into that and make a lot of sense to me that way.
So it sounds like you're really focused on building a collaborative environment that's breaking down the traditional silos that have existed in education and creating more of a cohesive, just like a space where people feel included and they have buy-in, where for a long time there's not been any buy-in. It's just not welcomed. It's not a welcome thing that's exists in most school districts today.
Yeah,
And
we
therefore
shouldn't
we
have.
see that trickling down to a variety of things, whether that's a lack of student engagement, lack of parent engagement, the animosity that you mentioned, which we've seen at school boards, right? Like we've seen really crazy things happen.
Oh, we see people escorted out by police at school board meetings. That's wild.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild.
Yeah, it's very crazy, but it's the breaking down of silos, which I think is an important aspect that I don't think a lot of people think about when helping to do that. And I think districts overall, it's not that they don't want to do that; it's that they don't know how to do it and they don't have the time to do it. So they need the tools and the resources to be able, or the services to be able to help guide them into that process. And then once they do, then they have the tools to be able to continue on moving that direction, which I think COVID forced them to do that, but there was still a lack of transparency and still a lack of communication. It was just that parents saw what their kids were doing. It wasn't because the districts were overly communicating what was happening. It was that parents had to help their students. So there was no other way for
Well,
that to happen.
your home became a classroom, therefore the district had to be there with you. But yeah, it wasn't not at any district's fault necessarily.
No.
It wasn't like, hey, let me give you resources. It was like, hey, can you just make sure your kid's online? That's not the same.
Yeah. So let's move into, obviously, in the name of your company. And sorry, everyone. I have my child now and he likes to spread germs. So if you hear me throughout this and you think she sounds like a horse, that's just what's happening. So you guys are welcome for that. But anyway, so in your business, obviously your name is BrightMinds AI. So let's talk a little bit about AI, because AI is just the thing, right? It's the topic everyone talks about. It's the thing that's in all the media and all the news and every single thing that we talk about. So how do you find, how are you able to help districts, build that process of the AI policy? Are there any pitfalls that you're seeing when you're doing that? And what are some of the hardships that are in place when people are adopting those AI policies? Because we know they're either doing it a lot, like at Canva, I see them. Some districts are doing it, and most districts still have most of the features turned off for their students. They're not even giving them the opportunity to do that. So how are you finding that, like the pressure for districts to either adopt a policy or not adopt a policy? And how are you kind of fostering that to make them feel more comfortable?
That is probably like one of my areas of great passion, is where the policy lies. There is a thing, I see a pattern often, and probably you can both see it as well. I mean, we could probably have a whole nother conversation about things have always just been this way. So
Yeah.
we just continue to do things this way. And we have histories actually of policy that were written originally as guidance, right? And over time and through legislation, it's come down really more to like a code of conduct and more punitive. There is a lot of either excitement or fear that's driven by AI. You don't really get a whole lot in the middle. And there are a lot of people who are happily embedding it inside of platforms, sometimes disclosed clearly, sometimes just at the here's your updated terms and conditions. And for schools, I think where it really begins is just understanding what the outcome of a policy is meant to be. And policy is it's not built to be punitive. You build codes of conduct, and we have laws and codes of ethics and things that tie to this, but the policy is just meant to guide you in which direction. So I think sometimes a lot of the fear and the hesitancy is like, wow, it's too much work. Um, it's always been this way. I don't know if I'm okay to rewrite this thing. I don't know if it's in line. I can assure you it is hours of reading and a lot of work to get a really good understanding state by state as to whether or not your policy is aligning. And AI has revealed massive gaps in policy and practices across education, much like COVID did. So I think a lot of that is really, again, just back to what Claire was saying, like just an open conversation. It is okay to not know the answer about what to do next, because the beauty of at least the AI piece is we're all navigating this at the same time together. So there is no proven perfect solution right now. What it's going to take is just openly asking for support from your community and then going to people who have been working on building the expertise to make that happen.
And asking critical questions of your providers. I think that's the only thing I would add, is that a lot of districts, for a lot of good reasons, trust the providers that they have. They've never done anything wrong. They continue to render the service or the product that they've always, that the district has always wanted, whatever. But especially now's the time to start asking questions about, with this last feature update, what is that? Where does the data go? I think it would scare the daylights out of people in general, but certainly parents, to know how many EdTech vendors freely share your child's data with other companies in and outside the industry. And it probably would also scare people to know how many EdTech companies profit from sharing your students' data. Asking really good critical questions, and you're not a pain in the butt for asking them. If you get kind of a response like that, then you should have. If you get a hesitant response, then you probably should have asked the question a lot earlier.
That's interesting. I would hope, because that's not COPA or FERPA compliance, that edtech companies aren't doing that, because then they're breaking both FERPA and COPA. But I guess that is on the edtech companies to reveal. But it's very interesting. I think that you say that it's just the transparency. So it sounds like you're creating a safe space for districts to come to you and be like, hey, this is our pitfalls. These are the things that we're lacking. Because you both have experience in all these spaces, but also that you've been educators as well, then it creates a more I don't know, kind of like a warm, cozy bed for somebody to come in and just be like, hey, this is what we're doing. And it's not being shunned, and doesn't feel too, really stiff and staunchy, which it can feel oftentimes when people are reaching out to other providers.
Well, and Jessica does a great job. She's done this for several EdTech companies themselves. She does a great job at reviewing. She has a whole system that she uses to review privacy policies, features, that kind of stuff. And then she's able to give these EdTech companies, several of our partners, in fact, back that data and let them know, you're out of compliance. Here's something that makes you slightly less safe. Here's a thought on this other thing that you could do that, do you really need to be collecting that data if you're not actually doing anything with it? Just because you can collect it doesn't mean you need to. And we've had organizations ask her to review their privacy policies, their student data security policies or practices. And we have districts asking for us to review similarly the things that they're using to make sure that they're compliant, which I think is fair. I mean, I don't know about the two of you guys, but when I went through my educator prep class and even my master's, there was no student data privacy reading course.
No.
And my guess is
Nor did
that
I know that I would have to put a whole list together of all the tools that they're using to have parents sign off on.
exactly.
Those are just
Well, and
not
I
things
think
that you talk about.
I would bet that administrators don't have that or didn't have that for the majority of administrators that are in place now. So I think the fear of looking like you don't know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
get away from that, because it's not something you're expected to know. It's not something you've been taught and you forgot. This is something where it is okay to be like, dude, I have no idea. Like I want to be right, and I don't have a background in this, so I need help. And I don't think there's any shame in that. I would rather be upfront saying that I don't know than be wrong later. Because being wrong means a lot of times major data breaches or major issues for the districts. That's one thing that we see with district administration and some teachers, is the not wanting to look not knowledgeable. And I would pivot that or turn that on its head for people. I don't know tax law because I don't actually do tax laws. So that's why I go to a tax expert. I don't feel stupid or less qualified because I have to go to somebody to help me with my taxes. And I would encourage people to think about it that same way when it's this kind of stuff. It's not in your wheelhouse, and it shouldn't have to be necessarily.
Yeah. I think that's really good points, and just doing the EdTech audit and things like that. So we do know that there are a few other providers that do EdTech audits and do that. So how are your services a bit different when you guys are doing those EdTech audits with your school districts?
Yeah, I think the difference is that we don't. Now, I will say there are companies that do a great job providing the service on top of it. There's several of them that do a really good job aggregating all the data and then providing support. Unfortunately, oftentimes, not those companies, but for the ones that provide it, a lot of times it's just a dashboard. And so if you are already struggling to figure out how to reduce licenses or how to figure out redundancies or efficiencies, a dashboard's not going to help you much. And we have administrators say to us regularly, I don't want another dashboard. If that's what you guys are going to do for me, I don't want another dashboard. What I need is the step after the dashboard. I know that we're overspending, or I suspect that we've got more licenses than we need. And if I knew what to do with it, I would have solved that already. But what is the next thing? And especially when you've got like competing platforms. Maybe you have 2 math supplementals that you're using K-12. Do you need both? And if you don't need both, where's the cutoff? Do you get rid of one entirely? And I think the other thing that we bring to the table, besides just the like, hey, we will hold your hand, we'll walk you through our thought process, we'll spend time with you reviewing the data. We also help with offboarding, which I have yet to see anybody doing that. Now, that isn't to say they don't. I just haven't heard of it. But like, for example, if you've got one teacher still using platform A, they're the holdout. Mrs. Johnson's using this, and by God, she's used it for 20 years and whatever. If you decide to cut that program for efficiency, which you may, then we help offboard that teacher from that platform. How do you get all the data that you need? How do you figure out what it is that you were using the platform for the most, or where was the most information coming from? How do you take that, get into a new platform? We'll help onboard you into the new platform along with, whatever the onboarding process is for the new platform. But what we really do is beyond that onboarding, we help you figure out how do you optimize that to do the things that this other platform was doing for you before. So you're not, all 3 of us have been through that where you're big into a program and then the district the next year is like, actually, we cut it. And then you're like, well, that's how I was collecting my math scores for, classwork. Great. Now what? So it's instead of just the how do you cut costs, we go beyond how do you cut costs, and it's how do you help teachers and staff make sure that this loss doesn't mean struggle later or doesn't mean a massive amount of problems for you. How do we make this a smooth transition? And that is not something we see in the industry much, if at all.
Claire, I think you said one question that we grapple with, and I think actually kind of came even to the root of some of the offers within BrightMinds, and that is all these things have happened, now what? And I think that, what we've seen is that there are a lot of times that there's a solution that's offered, and then past that, we're hands off. And we both feel very strongly that when somebody reaches that point and they're like, okay, well, that's gone, but now what? That we're there to answer that question, now what? And we have something for you that will help fix that as you move forward.
And even if that's not another tool, it might just be something as simple as like, hey, you're going to start doing this thing instead, or we'll help you figure out whatever. I think the other big motivator for us, when all 3 of us are former teachers, I've been on here and talked about this before. Teachers are my people. And so there's a teacher shortage. We don't have enough qualified people wanting to be teachers. And certainly the last thing that we want to see is teachers leaving as a result of things that could be mitigated. And you would hope that losing a platform isn't the last straw, but it can be. There's a lot smaller things that are the last straw for people. So if you've got Mrs. Johnson that uses this program, she's been here for 20 years, she's got institutional knowledge, and you take that away, that may be Mrs. Johnson takes early retirement. And now what? Now you're down a highly qualified teacher, institutional knowledge. What do you do? Because you're certainly not going to be able to find another Miss Johnson, probably.
Yeah.
And it's just, you lose good people for silly reasons that you could totally prevent. And I think it would be one of those things that it won't stem the tide of teachers leaving the classroom, but it could make somebody's life a little easier. And we feel very strongly that teachers have had a rough go. And if there's anything that we can do to make that job a little bit easier and more enjoyable, we are all here for that.
Yeah. Thinking about teachers at the heart of it. I think that's
Absolutely.
I think everyone gets into starting a business for the most part. It's either to help students or to help teachers. A lot of times it can be at the top too, but I think that's usually the delineating factor for why someone does something that they are passionate about doing and building the business. And I think you've mentioned a variety of stakeholders at the end, like not just students, not just teachers, thinking about the holistic picture of an entire district and who the stakeholders are, which is something that's unique. I think a lot of people don't talk about all the aspects of stakeholders. I think it's just one thing, like a student, a teacher, an admin, very rarely parents. That's just not unless it's a B2C product, right? Like that's just straight consumer, consumerized product. But I think that's just an interesting component of being able to create all of that, those safeguards for that. So you mentioned one thing about professional development, and I think that's an interesting component about building learning pathways. So a lot of times when people are providing a professional development service, they're usually providing a PD around one specific tool or one specific thing. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing as far as your learning pathways and how they vary from other service providers as far as professional development goes?
Yeah, Jessica, you want to kick us off with why we are tool agnostic in our PD?
Well, okay. So my original idea and comment on this is like, right, we have personalized learning paths for students, but what about everybody else? And how can that be modeled if we aren't even really offering something that looks the same on the educator's level? And Claire's actually done an incredible job getting that rounded up for us to get into these quadrants. So I'll let you speak on that part, Claire.
Yeah, so when we think about educational platforms for students that tout personalized learning as their big their big hook, the first thing that a lot of them start with is kind of a readiness assessment. So we have created something called the Praxis Profile, which is a relatively detailed survey that goes through and asks a series of Likert style questions around how teachers feel about anything from identity in their school all the way to just how comfortable are you putting a new piece of tech in with little training, or it's new, whatever. And when we come out of that, we have a quadrant system that, based on their responses, it sets them into a quadrant. And then we also have a series of lenses that are pulled out through that survey where we can look at somebody and identify this is someone who is very, very likely to go along with the flow, not raise concerns if they have any, those kind of things. And so we're able to build, or what we do build, we build these personalized learning pathways around these quadrants with activities that are aimed at giving people opportunities to explore different lenses. So if you're somebody who is super excited to use new technology, but doesn't always feel like it works super well for you, we put you in a series of activities with others, either from your cohort or outside your cohort, that will push you to work with people and push you to think about things in a slightly different way. So I'll use the belonging example for this. So if we have an educator that is highly belonging affiliated, they're unlikely to raise concerns in professional development, or they're unlikely to raise concerns when they're reviewing a new platform. We put them in activities where we talk about it's super important that you're able to read through a privacy statement and understand it. How can we give you the tools to feel comfortable speaking up so that you don't feel like a rabble rouser, if that's what you're afraid of, but that you're still being able to come to the table with like, hey, I have a question about this. I'm a little concerned. And so we give people, again, opportunities to pull different AI tools into their practice to see if it's something that jives with what they do. And if it doesn't, throw it out. But we also give people opportunities to expand a little bit about how they feel in terms of comfort level, put them in positions where they have low to no risk, like that example with belonging. I'm going to give a teacher an opportunity to speak openly about how they feel about a program in grounded terms that don't sound like, I feel like it's not safe, or I don't feel like this is a good fit. Mm-hmm. So providing that kind of sentence framing or that language structure. And then we have that group function in such a way that, we're going to let everybody who is a high belonging affiliated person go first, because we want to hear your ideas before they're affected by other people's idea. All of you people, such as myself, who are highly individualized focused, who are happy to jump in and say, not interested, you're going to pause because you have your ideas are fully formed. You can wait. We can't have you talk over these other people. So we not just are providing people the learning opportunities and the actual activities to practice these skills, or bringing AI into their classroom if they so choose. We're also providing them a opportunity as a team to better understand how each other works, when we should be relying on this person's expertise versus another person's expertise. And we try to really carve out space for each of those individual profiles of people to feel like they have agency. I think that's one of the big things in the transparency vein that we've talked about. Not just teacher agency at all levels has been stifled to a point where, in my opinion, student engagement is at an all-time low, primarily because students don't have agency. It's wild to think about. Jessica and I just talked about this the other day. It's wild to imagine just having a no dress code Friday can really invigorate an entire campus of students.
And teachers.
Yeah, and their teacher. It's all about finding ways to provide people back agency where they are the experts. Teachers are experts at what they do. Let them have some agency. Let them have agency. Administrators are experts in their field. Give them agency. Students are experts in a lot of the stuff that we don't all know about. No cap. Like, give them agency. I like to throw in really outdated slang and see what I can bring back into fashion or what I can kill immediately. Like, no one will ever use that phrase again. But yeah, so it's all about, again, restoring that agency, that kind of stuff. So rambled on a little bit there, but take from that what you will.
Yeah, it's that agency piece, which I think we've talked about throughout the interview, is like that agency, like collaborative stakeholders, and just being able to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, which I think is interesting. Okay, so how obviously we know the educational landscape is continuously evolving. Obviously slowly, in my opinion, but also fast at the same time, right? Like they're having to evolve with tools and things. And I actually think now they're having to evolve in a much faster rate than we've ever seen because the tools are changing so vastly. So how do you guys stay adaptable and responsive to the changes that are happening in educational standards and practices?
I think that's probably my wheelhouse of expertise. When I was teaching internationally, it was really interesting because I was at an American school, but I was actually running a department of, I think we had 84 different nationalities. And still, I'm needing to prepare all of those students to be college and career ready on an American curriculum. So I became very well versed in what that looks like from state to state. And I continue to keep myself very well versed. And I continue to work on a PhD, which requires me to also do the same. So I spend a lot of time with my nose in books and profiles that follow media and news so that I can keep up to date on that. So it's a lot of work. And honestly, when I think about schools, and I think about even the amount of time I spend dedicated to keeping up with how rapidly things are changing right now, it would be wild to think anybody inside of a school building could possibly have the time to keep up with all of these things and not need someone, some support, some question that's just your go-to best friend, whatever, that's going to have an answer for you or the ability to find it. Because there is a lot moving all at one time right now, both all the way from federal right down into states, parishes, counties, individual schools. There is a lot that's happening at one time right now.
And Jessica doesn't do herself justice there. When we talk about she reads, I read enough. I've never seen anybody who reads more than Jessica does. And I actually don't know how she has time to do it, frankly. But if there is something that we don't know, or if there is some question that pops up, even tangentially, she is diving into whatever resources she can find and comes up with, I found 6 peer-reviewed blah blahs that talk about this thing. So it's, I mean, when she says that she does reading and she's well-versed, she's not, I would need an understatement. And then I think the other thing that helps us keep up is that we've got an advisory board in place. We're in process of bringing on several people for advisory roles that are both in and out of education and that bring a wildly diverse experience to the team. And then we keep doing teacher talks. I mean, we talked about that in the previous interview with me, that at this point I'm up to 650 plus teacher interviews. And so, or, coffee chats, between her keeping up on all the reading and all the conversations that she has, and then me boots in the school building with having these talks with administrators and teachers just from a coffee chat lens. We try to keep up as best we can. And there's still tools. I mean, there's tools we were just talking about this morning where I'm like, I've literally never heard of this. And yet here it is. So it would be like Jessica said, it would be nearly impossible, if not impossible, for anybody on a campus, it doesn't matter what your role is, to stay current with this stuff. It's hard for us to stay current with this stuff. And this is our full-time job.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be really difficult. So looking ahead, what do you think classrooms or learning environments will look like in the next 5 years?
Let there be joy in classrooms again, I think, is a lot of what the conversations for Claire and I have, is letting teachers be teacher experts again, because all the research backs up that this is where we get the greatest forward motion and progress for students, is when they feel like they belong there and teachers are able to make those decisions. And I think that that's ultimately what I see. Tools are, it should be, it's left up to the teacher to explore what works for them. It's left up to the communities what they want, in the same way that it's left up to parents for how technology is used inside of a household. And so I say let there be a lot more joy, a lot less punitive nature for, and letting some of the exploration just happen naturally, because I have all the confidence in the world that the teachers that are being put in classrooms are there for good reason, and that they have the answers to what works for the kids that are sitting in front of them.
I agree. And in parallel to her let there be joy and the let there be agency and let there be transparency, I think the big thing is let there be educational technology companies that serve individual clients best. So and I think we've talked about this before, Leena, where my guess, and I will completely deny that I ever said this if it doesn't come to pass. My guess is that we're eventually looking at an environment where you have networks of small providers, similar to kind of what we're building with our partner networks. We do this thing. We are completely focused on transparency within districts. That's our guiding light. We're partnered with companies that feel very similarly, that do different things than we do. Some of them are product providers, some of them are additional service providers, whatever it is, but their guiding light is also transparency. So my guess is that you're going to see these little, unlike with the conglomerates that we see that buy a bunch of people up, I don't think that's sustainable anymore. I don't think the money's there for it. And the lack of cohesion between products, I think, is going to be the death of them, or at least will be a major part in decline of those conglomerate setups. Instead, what I think you're going to have is these little kind of partner organizations or little ecosystems that serve a particular pillar or guiding light. And depending on what your district is really focused on, you might be working with several of the partner companies within this particular ecosystem because they all work really nicely together. And I think what will help precipitate that is with districts facing financial crunch like they haven't before, and truly having to compete with private networks and charters now, and each other. I mean, it's not just charters getting places; charters are having to compete with other places too. We're going to start seeing, hopefully, districts that really exercise that agency. You don't have to be okay with two platforms owned by the same company not communicating with each other. You can demand better. Whereas I think in prior years, districts, not that you've had money forever, in COVID you did because you could just buy whatever you want. But before it was more of well, you guys are the product experts and you know what you can do. And if you can't do it, we'll make it work. We'll just export CSVs. And I think at this point, you've got enough people in the education sector, in terms in classrooms, in administration, that recognize interoperability is not a nice to have. It's a must have, and are now going to hopefully hold companies accountable for making sure that that is optimized. And if it's not, it should hurt somebody somewhere. It should be, we're not paying for it, or we're not paying that amount, or you need to build something that's going to make it more effective for our district. So it'll be very interesting to see the rise of agency in districts. I cannot imagine that is not coming. And I would bet it's coming in the next year or two.
Yeah. Interesting that you say that, but I think I've not talked broadly about my views about education and all the tech companies and all the things that have changed. But I think what districts need to be thinking about, and I'm sure your ed tech audits and the things that you guys are helping build them, is that funding is changing. It's not the ESSER free for all that it was for a while. That's pretty much gone. It's probably won't be coming back anytime soon. At least, we don't know, obviously, but districts are going to really have to start thinking about their budgeting. And I think that's going to affect a lot of ed tech companies. We've seen a lot of companies raising funds and doing all that other kind of stuff. But I think it's going to be really interesting, because when you do walk around, obviously you guys are service providers, but as a product provider, when you walk around at these ed tech conferences, a lot of the tools are starting to bleed together. They're offering the same thing because AI is able to fill the gaps that weren't there before. So now they can start to look more like each other, and they end up serving the same purpose as each other. So it's really interesting. And I think that will be a really interesting adoption. It'll be really interesting to watch this play out in a longer play. But, I think leaning in on that EdTech audit and those types of things are really, really important for teacher agency, for teacher happiness, for that sort of thing that's happening in the school districts. I think it can really have a big change, a long-term change that will create a positive impact in the classrooms that's been missing for way too fucking long. And sorry that I said that, but that's just the truth. I've not dropped an F-bomb on here before, so you guys are welcome.
I didn't hear what?
So
I didn't even hear what you
I don't typically,
said.
because then it flags it as like explicit content, but I just felt like I had to say it. So for both of you, if somebody is looking to find out more information about BrightMinds and how to get in contact with you and maybe even adopt you as a service provider, what's the best way to do that?
Reach out to us at hello@brightminds-ai.com. You can go to the website. By the time this episode airs, I've got all my fingers toesed and practically should cross my eyes for this. We'll have our updated website up and running, but you can email either of us. It's our first name at brightminds-ai.com. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, I feel like multiple times a day, unfortunately for me. But, our DMs are always open. And
Yes.
we're not even, I'll throw this out there too. We talk to a lot of people all the time. They don't all turn into customers, and we're still happy to talk to people. If you've got a question, ask it. If we've got an answer, we'll give it. We are here to do good in the space, unlike others who are in the space to do well.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Well, thank you both so much for coming on, sharing your insights and a little bit about the work that you're doing. If you're not already doing so, I hope that you follow both of these ladies on LinkedIn and make sure to connect and reach out. And again, thank you both so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Leena.
All right, well, everybody, we will see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much. You've made it this far. We are so thankful that you're here. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, thumbs up, comment below, and join us for all of our next videos. Thank you so much for joining us as we disrupt education together. See you guys soon. Bye, everybody.